Hello, Facebook family and friends. This is Assemblywoman Suzette Martinez Valderas. This beautiful Monday, May 16th. We are just about 3 weeks out from some major midterms votings going on. So if you have received your ballot, make sure that you return that ballot for the primary election on or before June 7th. You will also have the opportunity in LA County to vote in person at any of LA County's voting locations or centers across LA County. So if you're at work in downtown and you live in Santa Clarita, you can still vote at any voting center across LA County. Obviously, you can vote at them in the district too. I am running for re-election in the 40th Assembly District, the newly drawn 40th Assembly District, which includes Santa Clarita and now more of the beautiful San Fernando Valley, which y'all know is where I was born and raised. I have been working so hard on the issues most important to our community and have been really excited about doing these continuous Facebook Lives where we just sit and have a conversation about the issues impacting our community. And the issue that I wanted to talk about, given that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, is mental health. And we hear, in LA, across California, really across the US, that we are facing a mental health crisis. But that in itself seems so huge and daunting because people dealing with mental health issues are really potentially dealing with a variety of issues. And it is a huge topic. And there are just so many intricate layers of what mental health is and what our mental health crisis is in California. We also are in the state legislature and the state assembly and state senate dealing with a lot of surplus dollars, and we're trying to ensure that we are providing resources to address the mental health crisis in California. But what does that mean? Where should we be spending the money? What is the crisis that we're facing? So with me today, I'm so excited to bring on a licensed marriage and family therapist, Larissa Mozes, with Larissa Mozes, and she told me to get that right, before, but beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about mental health.
Yes, it's important.
Absolutely, as you probably know, by trade every day, how important mental health is for people. And quite often when we think about mental health, everyone thinks about mental health a little differently, I would imagine, whether it's you're thinking about anxiety or depression, or I come from, I previously worked within the autism community, and mental health for those that dealing with autism and or individuals and families who deal with individuals with autism, mental health is a different perspective for them. We had talked a little bit earlier. For me, I had severe, postpartum, and it's funny because I say even now postpartum, and I don't necessarily say postpartum depression because I had postpartum anxiety and I had postpartum what was called obsessive imagery.
Right.
So I didn't feel depressed, but I knew something was wrong. So if you had to sum up mental health in one sentence or a paragraph, how would you define what is mental health?
Well, I think mental health is just taking care of ourselves, because our mental mind is ourself. I think a lot of people think that, people need to, go to therapy, for example, if something is wrong or if there's something going horrible in our lives. But I think it can be a combination of everything. If people have things good going in their life, they should also be in therapy because we want to talk about it and keep things going well. So I think that's like the biggest thing out there, is for us to kind of change how we think about mental health, where in the past it was more of like a taboo type topic or a taboo type thing. But I think the more that we talk about it and taking care of ourselves, like that's the most important thing here, is to make sure we're living our best lives and we're at our fullest potential.
And people who, that's such a great point. My time at Autism Speaks, as I kind of studied and worked hard to provide services to address the mental health of individuals and families on the autism spectrum, my understanding just broadened so much. And it was enlightened to the stigma of mental health and needing either, therapy, or within even certain communities, the stigma of having a disability, which is also sometimes some people feel like may find some synergy with, an issue having to deal with someone's mental health. In the Latino community, too many Latinos don't like to go to the doctor. So they're definitely not going to want to go see a therapist. So different cultures sometimes deal with stigmas. How can we provide support and educate the public and advocate for policies that, address mental health, but also how can we in the community address the stigmas that still do exist? It's gotten a lot better, but they still exist.
I think it's just really talking about it more and having like good influential people talking about it. So, you, for example, talking about it, having those that people look up to saying like, no, it's a good thing. Also, the media can sometimes show the good sides of mental health and also the bad side of mental health. So I think it's also being able to differentiate the difference and kind of, more so encouraging it and instead of thinking it as a bad thing, really having people talk about it more. And really, I think it also comes, like you said, with the different cultures, building on our support system. If somebody is going to somebody else and says that I'm struggling with some sort of mental health issue, instead of bringing them down, on it, really encouraging them and be like, how can I help you? How can I support you? And maybe even encouraging therapy in general, because once we have people supporting us, that's just going to encourage us even more to better ourselves.
So, one of the, I'm not missing anyone here. I have 21 nieces and nephews.
Wow.
I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and they range from about 2.5 years old to 25 years old. What I've seen though in my, teenage nieces and nephews, especially during COVID, was just this, onset of isolation that led to anxiety, that led to depression. Even bad grades.
Yeah.
So what have you seen, or what are you seeing as a result of, I think, the pandemic and isolation? What is going on with our youth right now?
I think that time with the COVID, it was very difficult because everybody was kind of stuck at home, and it caused a lot of that anxiety and depression because of the change in their routine, right? When kids go to school, for example, they have their home and then they have their school. They kind of have the separation. Everything was kind of combined together. So kids didn't really have that like safe space kind of anymore. So that was kind of the first difficulty, was not having a place to go, and that change in the routine, not being able to see their friends as much or have a lot of the outings. It took away a lot of the sports, a lot of the extracurricular activities. So things that kids normally look forward to were all taken away. So that caused a lot of the feelings that they were having.
So let's back it up, because I think for some people, they might not even know what anxiety is or what depression is. I'll tell you, even me, right? I remember I've had a few anxiety or maybe panic attacks in my life, and mostly in my younger years. I did not realize what was going on. One of the times I was a server and I was having a panic attack. And honestly, do you know how I brought myself down? I walked into the walk-in freezer to just kind of like, cool off. What is a panic attack? What's anxiety? What's depression? What are the signs or symptoms?
The main way I like to explain it to my clients that I work with is anxiety is when we're worried about the future, and depression is when we're worried about the past. When, it's best to obviously stay in the present, but that's easier said than done. So a lot of the times with anxiety, kind of is that uncontrollable worry or thinking. I always say we get most anxious at nighttime when we're trying to go to sleep, because we're thinking about all the things we need to do the next day, all the things we didn't complete that day. And depression is kind of also having that main lack of motivation. And to answer your question, the main way that I see like depression or can pinpoint it, and especially the youth, is when pretty much their mood or things that they like to do change. So if somebody used to go on hikes, for example, all the time, and then all of a sudden they don't want to do it anymore, we call it like the loss of interest. That's kind of my main sign of somebody that's depressed. Or, you know, if a kid used to play soccer and now they don't want to go to soccer practice anymore, or even kick it outside. Those are kind of the things that, you know, parents and teachers and all those things need to look out for.
So what should a parent do, or even if you're, if you're a young, like teenager or even a younger, adolescent, if you notice these signs in your friend or your parents or the reverse, what should be the next step if you have if you're suspect that there's some type of anxiety or depression going on?
I think a lot of it is, mostly asking them, but especially if you look at kids and adults too, we all have different support systems. I think that's the main thing to look at. But kids have certain things that they tell their parents, that they tell their friends, that they tell their teacher. So because we have people in different categories, those different people kind of need to come at them in different ways. And I think the most important thing at least parents can do is ask a lot of open-ended questions. So instead of saying like, after school, like, how are you? Or how was your day? It gives the opportunity for them to answer really short, like good, fine. But asking more like specific questions, like what classes are most difficult for you? Who's your favorite teacher? What kind of homework assignments are difficult for you right now? Like showing them that you have more of an interest, and then they gain kind of that more trust. And then you're able to notice when things are off with them more often.
So I had a bill that unfortunately is being held up right now in committee. But in a nutshell, it would have incentivized school districts to adopt an anonymous reporting program for kids and for junior highs and high schools in an effort to minimize, diminish, and prevent violence, gun violence, which we see on way too many campuses, across the United States and even here in the 40th Assembly District. What are the advantages of having anonymous reporting systems for, especially on school campuses? What would you think?
Yes, I love the idea of anonymous, like any kind of commenting on a school campus. I was a school therapist for 5 years. Like I got to see hands-on working with kids, and it's nice to have it anonymously, because I feel a lot of the time, especially kids in the school, they don't really speak up a lot about issues because of like what they think is like peer pressures, or they could be bullied by kids around them for saying or speaking up for certain things. And that's a whole other issue that I think as individuals need to work on. But if kids had like a place where they felt safe and were able to kind of comment and say how they were feeling, and others were looking like at those comments, I think that's a great way to kind of fix a lot of the problems that could be happening on the school campuses.
I also want to kind of, our conversation, we're already 15 minutes in, and I feel like we could talk for an hour because there's so many things to talk about. Before I came to the state assembly, I ran a nonprofit preschool, and we had, active shooter drills. So you, as a, former therapist on a campus, sure experience and have had training on active shooter. How can parents train, not necessarily train, but have conversations with their kids about safety and even mental health? What can a parent do to engage with their children to address some of these issues?
Well, I think to word it kind of like you said, like a drill, just like we have any other type of, there are earthquake drills, fire drills. I think we have to treat it the same as any other drill, and, not make a big deal out of it to kind of scare them, especially with like the younger ones that might not understand it as much. And any type of those situations, and any drill can be a very anxiety producing situation. So I think kind of, explaining to them ahead of time, be like, okay, when things like this happen, we're going to be a little anxious, and here's what we do, right? We're going to listen. If we're at school, we're going to listen to the teachers, kind of follow the protocols of what's in the drill. But I think the biggest thing is to not make a big deal about it and kind of to treat it like we would any other drill, because they're all important in the same way.
Yeah. I want to move on to like two other areas. The first being our homeless population. And, you know, when we talk about the homeless crisis right now, because you see it, you know, you drive down, you know, pretty much any street for more than 10 minutes, you're going to see a tent, or you're going to see, you know, campers, RVs. You're going to also see somebody who, you know, is often, you can tell, either has some type of undiagnosed mental health issue, or diagnosed. We don't know, frankly, right? And or maybe even has some type of drug addiction. Obviously, I completely agree that we need to house the homeless. But the other two components that are much, much more difficult, in my opinion, is addressing the care and the treatment and services for people living and dying on the streets that clearly cannot make decisions for themselves at this moment in their life to seek treatment or therapy. Too often the resources don't exist, or the policy doesn't exist to help these people. How can we in the legislature help you, the person on the ground doing the work, address the needs of the homeless population as it pertains to mental health and even drug addiction?
Well, I think kind of like you mentioned earlier, a lot of those that are homeless, it's kind of the undiagnosed mental health issues. So I think what it really comes down to, like you said, is needing a lot more, you know, resources. The homeless need to know that they feel kind of safe and secure. So at a lot of the resources, if they feel like they have, you know, a house over their head, food to eat, right? With that, it's going to slowly start to build their self-confidence. And then in that, like there are some, but not many, nonprofits that offer a lot of, you know, therapy and resources to the homeless, but it's not enough. And as more and more homeless get on the street, more and more grow, and then we have less resources to kind of help them. But once they feel that safety net, then, you know, if therapy is encouraged for them, they're going to be more likely to go, because they're going to be like, okay, this is just another form of help.
Right. And I definitely think from the state side, we've put billions of dollars into the homeless crisis, and things are not necessarily, they're getting worse. I mean, let's just be real and frank. So we need better accountability, better transparency. Where are these dollars going? Are beds being filled? And the other thing I talk about, because there's so many industries that face this problem, but the workforce, yes. Right? We just do not have enough therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and mind you, there were 3 different things, but a lot of them treat all of different types of patients. In your opinion, I mean, how hard was your road to becoming a licensed therapist? How can we encourage more people to go into this line of work? And when did you first know that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, it was funny that you said that. I actually, when I was younger, I really liked working with kids. So I thought I would want to be a teacher. But as I, you know, was in my college and kind of learning how to help people, I was like, oh, you know, there's ways that I can help people in other ways that I really wanted to kind of connect with people and help people. So that's kind of where the form of me wanting to be a therapist came from. But as you said, there's definitely room for more people to get into the mental health field, whether it's a therapist, psychiatrist. A lot of us work kind of hand in hand together, and we kind of consult with each other. And what's nice about it is at the end, we all just want to help other people. So that's really what it comes down to.
Is helping people. We are 2 kindred spirits, because it's why I serve the public as well. The other thing the governor has proposed, I think it's $37 million that would go to the judicial branch throughout California for care courts. policy has changed a lot over the past, 4 or 5 decades in California. I don't think any of us ever want to get back to those days where we had people that were literally put in institutions, treated horrifically, and their civil rights were frankly violated. But there also, comes this point where we do have to make sure that people are receiving treatment. So not to harp on this, but in your, do you think the care courts and funding this will work, or how do we have a balanced approach to moving people off of the streets, forcing them into care? If that's what this care court does, is that going to work? How do we find a balanced approach?
There's good and bad to it. I feel like it's very difficult to kind of force somebody into, therapy or to want to change, right? They have to see it for themselves. But I think reframing it and having them see the benefits and the positives that can come from it, and instead of kind of, forming it as like, this is something you need to do, kind of showing them this is going to be helpful. And once you complete this and you meet these goals, kind of showing them more so like what their future, could look like. And kind of making it more as like a collaborative experience for them, instead of, these are the things that you need to work on, and kind of telling them what they need to do, like really sitting down and talking with them and being like, okay, this is what we need to work on, and coming up with goals together. Because if they feel like they have some kind of input in like their journey, then they're going to be more willing to do it because they know it's going to benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I also think that key component that is missing is the engagement, right? Is the outreach of actually having the resources for therapists to go out onto the streets to engage and build a relationship with individuals. Yes. That can also be should be a necessary part of moving them off of the streets and into care facilities so they can actually receive treatment. But we do know what is happening now is not compassionate. It's inhumane. People are living and dying on our streets. And it's something that we in the legislature, I know that I am serious about doing something about it, but we in the legislature need to we need to double down on our efforts to address the issue. The other thing I kind of want to, I don't want to say I saved it for last, but it just, it's not always easy for me to talk about my postpartum, anxiety. I had no idea how challenging it was to find care when I was experiencing postpartum, depression, anxiety. After I thought, and I was like, hey, okay, something's wrong. This isn't right. And my mom had a conversation with me. She's like, maybe you should, talk to somebody about it. I had, a good job. I was on maternity leave. I had great insurance. I had phenomenal insurance when I had my baby too. It was so hard to find a therapist that specialized in postpartum. It is so hard. And you're a mom of a 2-year-old too.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's been a bigger thing. I myself, I also had, like you said, there's postpartum anxiety, there's postpartum depression. Some people can have either or, some people have both. But what's nice about it is I've seen, especially with a lot of my colleagues, there's been a lot more trainings that have been offered to kind of focus on postpartum. Some therapists even kind of label themselves as postpartum kind of therapists. And a lot of them, especially with a lot of the virtual therapy and some in person, a lot of therapists have been more open to kind of, the moms bringing the baby with them, to session, or if they do a virtual session, they might do it, during their nap time or just kind of keep them in the room. I think in the past, a lot of, people didn't do that, but now it's become a thing that's more kind of open and welcoming. So I think that's been really helpful. And also after somebody just has a baby, the last thing kind of on their mind is I need somebody to talk to, right? There's so many other, responsibilities, adjusting to the routine, the diapers, the feedings. So I think in the back of our head, we're just also very tired from the lack of sleep. So a lot of it can be confusing as to what it actually is that we're feeling. So I think now there's a lot more resources for those that are struggling postpartum. And like I said, I saw a therapist after I had my baby. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So they were virtual sessions, but it was really helpful for me in kind of adjusting into motherhood.
I remember when I was looking for someone, I was looking for somebody that was covered by my insurance. Is that getting better too? Or is it meaning therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists that take insurance? Because that was a challenge for me 5 years ago.
It has. There are a lot more therapists that are getting on more like insurance panels and being able to take on more insurance. I think pre-pandemic, some insurance companies weren't doing it as often, but then when there wasn't really a choice, then people weren't going in person, it kind of forced them to kind of switch over to the telehealth, which I really appreciated. And not all, but a lot of insurance companies are actually waiving people's like co-payments for the like video sessions. So right now with my clients that I see, most of them, almost all of them have insurance, and it's kind of encouraging. But like you said, there's also a huge wait list right now that I've seen for people wanting to get therapy because of the lack of, staff. So I've had some people that I've had on a wait list, and I do my best to try and get them referrals, but there's just not always enough. So that's kind of the third part.
And that would make sense, right? Because if we're using more telehealth, which is great, especially for women, living in our district in Agua Dulce or Acton, that have to commute to find a therapist, having telehealth is probably quite literally, a lifesaver for some of these women, and not just women. Yeah. But that also means that more people are using the services. So you need more therapists in the workforce.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that telehealth is for mental health services is here to stay?
Oh, definitely. I think it should stay. I mean, some people prefer in person, some people prefer video. In the end of the day, I think there's kind of also stigma out there that, telehealth, like through the video, isn't as beneficial as in person. But that's something that I highly disagree with. I think it's, the same. And I mean, I work with kids also telehealth. There's different ways that we can do kind of games or connect. So there's definitely ways. And I think it helps more people. I see a lot of people on their lunch break at work, or, after work or before they go to work. I think it saves that time where they don't have to, drive and kind of wait, and it's more beneficial for them.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for taking time out of your afternoon and away from your little one too. This May Mental Health Awareness Month, is there anything that you want to leave with people? If people are looking for help, what's the best, is there an emergency number or somewhere they should be turning to? I also have a number for LA County that I'm going to post right now, but can you guide people a little bit?
Yeah, well, if people do want to use their insurance, the best thing that they can do is call their insurance companies and say that they want, some mental health counseling. It's not always, it's sometimes hidden. You can't always see it, but if you call them, they will give you a list of providers that, will take, the insurance. And what's kind of nice about that is you can kind of look and see what their different specialties are, right? Some people want to focus on anxiety, some want to focus on depression. So I do think it's important for people to find the fit that is best for them. And also, like, sometimes when we're in that state of mind of we're anxious, we can't always do the work ourselves. So I think, leaning on our loved ones and kind of saying, hey, I'm, dealing with this, and to help them out, provide them assistance, maybe do a little bit of the research, getting them the phone numbers. Sometimes people just need that encouragement from others and the help to kind of get in the door. It's always the very first session that's the scariest. Yeah. Even for me as a therapist, every time I do a first session with somebody, and I've done thousands of sessions, it's still scary for me every single time. But after someone kind of gets their feet a little wet, then they get comfortable and they can make changes from there.
Yeah. It's really like having a very fun and not always fun, but fun and wise conversation with a good friend.
Yes.
So, thank you. And, this Mental Health Awareness Month, for all that you do for those looking to stay healthy mentally. And thank you for raising awareness about diagnoses that can be treated. If you, I can't thank you enough. I hope to talk to you very soon again as well.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So I hope that was informative. The objective is really just to raise awareness and just give you information. If you happen to be having or know someone who is having a mental health crisis or is looking for services, treatments, is just having a hard time, there are resources for you. Here in Santa Clarita, we do have the Santa Clarita Child and Family Center. Their phone number is on below the screen here. And you can always call the LA County Department of Mental Health and the center, which the number is 1-800-854-7771. And you can access that call center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes these situations, they just happen. And at all times of the day and night. So do not hesitate. If it's the middle of the night, there is still resources. There is still help. I hope this was very informative. And I'm looking forward to having another conversation with y'all next week. And we'll be hearing and seeing you soon. Until then, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you want me to talk about any particular topic. You can find me at SuzetteValadares.com. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook. Obviously, you're all following me on Facebook if you're watching this. Instagram as well. And please, me representing you, being your voice is a two-way street. So I encourage you to get involved, to send me messages, to tell me how I can be helpful and informative for the things that we need to address here in the 40th Assembly District. Again, Suzette Valadares, have a wonderful evening.